Coming up on Raceweek, the second half of the season on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour, with some of the toughest short tracks in the country, plus the major fall events, where Mike McLaughlin takes hold of the #1 spot and holds on to the checker. And a major announcement in New England, a super speedway in New Hampshire. Is now just behind us, and 1989 is just around the corner, and the excitement of New England motorsports is about to begin all over once again. Hello, I'm Ben Dodge, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Race Week. On this edition of Race Week, we're coming to you from Fox Hill Tower in Vernon, Connecticut, as we'll be taking a look at more of the excitement of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. Now, in the last edition of Race Week, we had the opportunity to take a look at the first half of the season, where Mike McLaughlin was running out front in the point standings, and Reggie Ruggiero was just starting to move in. But this edition of Race Week is perhaps the toughest point of the year. It's the second half of the year with some of the toughest spots on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. We'll be venturing to facilities like Riverhead Raceway and Riverhead, Long Island, the Oxford Plains Speedway and Oxford Plains, Maine, the Oswego Speedway, the Thompson Speedway, and a whole lot more. Besides taking a look at round number 2 on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour, we'll also be taking a look at the brand new plans for the Super Speedway of the North, located just outside of Concord, New Hampshire. But right now, the racing action resumes with great excitement on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour from Riverhead Raceway in Riverhead, Long Island. The NASCAR Winston Modified Tour resumed its excitement at the Riverhead Raceway once again. And Bob Park, one of the regulars, would be starting right up front on the inside of the front row. Outside of him was Donnie Howe with Reggie Ruggiero hunting him down initially in the start. Rick Fuller would have a problem, but would be able to rejoin the competition. And Brother Jeff, well, he'd have a tough time driving car number 4. Spin early in the event, have a tire problem, then rejoin in the competition. While all this was happening, Reggie Ruggiero was coming back to the front of the field and would run the outside of the racetrack, going around Howe to work his way to contend up front. A spin early in the event sent Steve Park around with Brian Ross spinning, but rejoining the competition, threading the needle, working his way back up to the front of the field. While this was happening, Bob Park was setting the pace out in front and maintaining the #1 spot to take down a major win at Riverhead Raceway. The NASCAR Winston Modified Tour then moved on to the Oswego Speedway, and Winston Cup driver Kenny Schrader became one of the stars of the show. Mike McLaughlin quickly jumped out in front, and he'd set the pace, but Tom Baldwin was moving in and challenging. But the real battle was between Brian Ross, already in the winner's circle in the major events at Oswego during 1988. Ross had dialed himself into the #2 spot, and Dave Resendiz was also challenging. Then out of nowhere would come Kenny Schrader. The Winston Cup driver looked so impressive in the modified. Tony Hirschman was also coming to the front of the field when Jan Leedy would develop a problem and drop off the pace. Dave Resendiz would cut a tire and go spinning with car number 79. And Reggie Ruggiero would be back in the pit area. Tom Baldwin would return, and Ruggiero would come back out with fresh rubber on car number 44. It was McLaughlin being hunted down by the TJ Toyota team of Schrader and Brian Ross. They'd work him over lap after lap, but McLaughlin would show the talents of a true champion and maintain position #1. It was Schrader on the inside with Ross hooked up on the outside. Consistently, the two would apply the pressure, but McLaughlin would take down the victory.
I just run the bottom. I see him outside of me. When I'd see him right there, I'd give him the room. And when I see that he could get alongside me getting in the corner, but then he'd lose it in the middle, then I could go back to running out to the wall coming out of the corner. Kenny Schrader, he's a hell of a race car driver in my book. Anybody to go into a strange division and run as well as he does, man, is definitely a professional race car driver.
My car got a little too tight. We were a little too tight on the setup tonight. I miscued a little bit on setup after the heat race. I was a hair loose in the heat, and so I tightened it up and just tightened it a little too much, and that hurt me up on the outside. But I'm happy with our finish tonight, and it's good to race that hard with somebody for 75 laps and come out of it that good.
The 16th event of the season would shift to the Thompson International Speedway for the running of a qualifying event for the Winston 300. Defending Tour champion Jim Spencer was in attendance, but Rick Fuller was the man in command of the field when they come down for the green. Fuller was out in front, and further back in the pack there were still some problems developing, but it was Fuller setting the pace out front. Mike Stefanik, using horsepower to the advantage, would challenge Rick Fuller for position number 1. But Rick Fuller was still maintaining the number 1 spot when suddenly Tom Bowles would spin with car number 76. Reggie Ruggiero would have a problem with a flat left front tire. Then Rick Fuller, Mike Stefanik, and Brian Ross would head to the pit area. The action was now on pit road as Mike McLaughlin was also in the pits, and so wasn't Jim Spencer. Back to green flag conditions, it was Reggie Ruggiero setting the pace once again at the front of the field. Suddenly Doug Heveron would go around with car number 1. But back up front, it was Stefanik and Ruggiero battling lap after lap, and Brian Ross wasn't letting either one of the two get out of his sight. Bob Park had worked his way back to the front of the field, and Jim Spencer was literally awesome, coming to the front of the field with car number 24. Spencer ran like a man possessed, looking for the position number 1, in hopes of starting in the front row of the Winston 300. Spencer had reeled him in but was really applying pressure when lap traffic caused Stefanik to lose position number 1. It was Jim Spencer now in command of the event, as Brian Ross was still battling with Stefanik, but Spencer would take down the victory. Spencer's victory would give him the pole position in the Winston 300. This was important due to the fact that Spencer had to compete in a Grand National event. Race number 17 of the NASCAR Modified Tour was at the Oxford Plains Speedway in Oxford Plains, Maine. It was Reggie Ruggiero and Rod Spaulding making up row number 1. Early in the event, Ruggiero would quickly jump out in front. Suddenly in the middle of the pack, Brian Ross would develop a problem, but Mike McLaughlin would take advantage of the outside groove to take over position number 1. As McLaughlin was starting to pull away, Tom Bowles would spin with car number 76. Then a challenge would develop in the middle of the pack as Brian Ross would dive to the inside of Rick Fuller. Mike Stefanik would also have a problem, and Jeff Fuller would cut a tire on car number 21. Back at the front of the field, the action was still on when suddenly Rick Fuller would stop on the racetrack with car number U2. A mad scramble as cars would go by as Ruggiero would head quickly to the pit area with car 44. Ruggiero was coming back to the front of the field, running the outside groove impressively. Then a mix-up would occur. Carl Pastriak and Tom Baldwin would be involved in this one. But Mike McLaughlin was still setting the pace at the front of the pack and would hold on to take down the victory.
Mike McLaughlin, by securing a win at the Oxford Plains Speedway, now is starting to expand his lead even further in the point parade. And the 1988 title is just around the corner, as the major events are still to be coming up on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. But right now it's time for another commercial break, and when we come back, we'll bring you more of the excitement for the major events like the Winston 300, the Race of Champions from Pocono, and the Oswego 200. Welcome back to Race Week. You know, next things are really starting to get heated up on the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. We are well past the midway point of the season now, and the major fall events are just around the corner. The problem is a lot of the teams are showing the worst of the wear, and the excitement is still on, the prestige of the point battle, and a whole lot more. Next, we'll be taking a look at the major fall events for 1988. We'll be venturing to the Oswego Speedway for a look at the Budweiser 200. The Winston 300 from the Thompson International Speedway, and the prestigious Race of Champions from the Pocono International Raceway. It all comes down to the wire as we venture then for a look at Shangra-La Motor Speedway, for a look at the Southern Tier 200 in Oswego, New York.
It was another trip back to the Oswego Speedway for the 18th event of the season. And Mike McLaughlin, who sat up front, would quickly start to pull away. Reggie Ruggiero would challenge him, though, and work his way to the front of the pack to take over position number 1. A wild mix-up would occur in the first turn involving Tim Conley and several other front-running competitors. But back at the front of the pack, there was still more problems developing for Mike McLaughlin. McLaughlin would spin, and Ruggiero would suddenly squeak by with car number 44. Then suddenly another mix-up would occur. Brian Ross would get a little bit out of shape. Then suddenly from the back of the pack, Ken Woolley would come in, try to avoid him and tag the wall hard with car number 40. But back to racing conditions at the front of the field, a real scramble for position number 1. Tony Jankaliak was trying to hold on as Tom Baldwin was right there in the thick of things. Jamie DeMato was running strong, and so wasn't Reggie Ruggiero. But still, the lead was now being maintained by car number 26 for George Kent. Then suddenly, Mike Stefanik would get up on his roof and slide down the back straightaway area with car number 16. This would bring out yet another caution on the field, but back to green, it was still George Kent who was setting a blistering pace, and he'd hold on to take down the victory. Next, the excitement returned to the Thompson International Speedway for the running of the Winston 300. Jim Spencer and Mike Stefanik were setting in the front row. It was Tom Baldwin and Jan Leedy to make up row number 2. The action was set. 300 laps was the distance in this event, and Jim Spencer and Mike Stefanik made a race of it right from the start. Stefanik would run the inside groove, but Brian Ross would quickly work his way to the front of the pack. Suddenly, George Kent and Tom Baldwin would come together. Mike Stefanik was down on pit road with car number 16, and so wasn't Brian Ross with car number 69. It was Spencer to have more problems down the back straightaway, making contact with Jeff Fuller with car 21. When Spencer would go around, the excitement of the fans would see Jeff Fuller drop out of the event with car number 21. Back at the front of the field, another problem would develop. Dave Rossetti's would come together with Rick Fuller, as car number 44, Reggie Ruggiero, was also involved. Severe work was going on in the pit area to get the 44 back, and Ruggiero would come back to challenge Mike Stefanik in the closing laps of the event. Stefanik and Ruggiero put on one impressive show lap after lap, but Stefanik would take down the victory. Next, it was on to the Race of Champions at the Pocono International Raceway in Long Pond, Pennsylvania. But qualifying would be tough for some of the stars of the Modified Tour. Reggie Ruggiero would develop a carburetor problem and would be forced to use a provisional starting spot to start the main event. The Race of Champions was about to begin. Brian Ross and Jan Leedy would be setting in row number 1. Initially, the best NASCAR Modifieds in the country would take the green. Then suddenly, George Kent would make contact with Lee Sherwood with car number 95. Then a spin would set everybody scrambling. Involved in the mix-up here was Rick Fuller. Back on pit road, it was Jim Spencer, as Rick Fuller's car would be brought to the pits on the hook. Back at the front of the field, it was Dave Rossetti's to set the pace. Mike Stefanik was battling with Satch Worley lap after lap, when Spencer would drop off the pace with car 24. Involved in another mix-up was Reggie Ruggiero. Back down pit road, Mike McLaughlin would drop out, the current point leader on the Modified Tour. And Dave Rossetti's, who ran up front, dropped out with a mechanical problem. It was Mike Stefanik battling with Reggie Ruggiero at the front of the pack. Brian Ross was also in the hunt, and Tom Baldwin was reeling both of the front cars in when suddenly another mix-up would occur. Involved this time late in the event was Brian Ross and Tom Baldwin. This would bring out a red flag situation, and while the field was setting under red, Stefanik was forced into the pits. This gave Ruggiero the number 1 spot, and he'd hold on to take down the Race of Champions.
Michael Stefanik had a little bit of bad luck, but racing's all luck to me. That's the way I look at it, and we happen to come out ahead today, and I'm just grateful for our crew for doing a great job.
And when I sat over there for that lengthy red flag, ridiculous red flag, thing just went flat, and that's that.
Next, the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour would move to Oswego, New York, the Shangri-La Speedway. Randy Hedger, one of the hometown favorites, would be setting right up front in position number 1. Hedger would start to pull away, but a would tangle with Rod Spaulding, and Tony Jankaliak would get away, and Rich Clark would show the worst of wear. Reggie Ruggiero would head back to the pit area with car number 44, but it was still Rossetti's to set the pace out in front. Tom Bowles would challenge on the inside when Tomato would spin with car number 3 down the back straightaway. Back at the front of the pack, it was still Tom Bowles battling with Rossetti. When Bowles would take over the lead, Rick Fuller would squeak by, and Tom Baldwin would try to work his way down under Rossetti's to take over position number 3. The two would battle lap after lap until Baldwin would take over the spot. Brian Ross would try to make the same type of move as Mike McLaughlin would patiently wait in the wings. Carl Pastriak would develop a problem. Mikey Winitsko would make contact but be able to get away as Pastriak would drop out with mechanical problems with car number 75. Then Bob Fuller would tag the wall backward with a fire erupting beneath car number 17. Mike Stefanik was back into the pit area, and Jeff Fuller was also quickly heading down pit road. It was now a battle between Tom Bowles and Rick Fuller, with Rick Fuller taking over the number 1 spot. Tom Baldwin was running the outside groove, and Brian Ross was still waiting in the wing. It was Baldwin out of shape for a moment. Suddenly, Baldwin would cross the track and come around. A mad scramble here as George Kemp would make head-on contact with car number 26. But back at the front of the pack, it was now Rick Fuller setting the pace. He would hold on to take down the victory. Next, the Modified Tour would move to the Orange County Speedway in Rougemont, North Carolina. But for Reggie Ruggiero, he knew this was the last opportunity. He'd have to beat Mike McLaughlin in this event and run right up front if he ever had hopes of becoming the Tour champion for 1988. Mikey Widitzko would quickly pull away at the front of the field. Doug Hemeron would develop a problem and stop to the outside of the racetrack. Mikey Widitzko would develop a problem with the flat. He was the leader of the event. This gave Rick Fuller position number 1. Deep into turn number 2, it was Ruggiero to dive down low, when Jay Hedgecock would spin with car number 41. Rod Spaulding and Carl Pastriak also had problems. Ruggiero was down on pit road, but Rick Fuller would take down the win. The final stop of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour would again be at the Martinsville Speedway, and all Mike McLaughlin had to do was start this event to become the champion for 1988. The field was set and under green, and out in front it was Jeff Fuller to set a blistering pace in the early laps of competition. Mikey Widitzko, Mike Stefanik, Mike McLaughlin, and Reggie Ruggiero were all running strong. Even Widitzko had broken away at the front of the pack when Mike Stefanik would try to challenge on the inside. Tom Baldwin had also run strong with car number 7. Dave Rosendis was battling with Kerry Malone when Kenny Schrader was coming to the front of the field with car number 14. Then suddenly George Kent and Gary Myers would come together. Reggie Ruggiero was back down on pit road, and so wasn't Mike McLaughlin. Mikey Widitzko, the leader, had pitted and come back out to rejoin the competition. Jan Leedy was now the new leader of the event, and Wayne Anderson was running in second with Kenny Schrader maintaining the number 3 spot. Suddenly Chris Ross would go spinning. Jamie DeMato would also be involved in the mix-up. Back at the front of the field, Ken Schrader had his hands full as Reggie Ruggiero was challenging him for position number 1. Mike McLaughlin was setting in the 3rd spot. And suddenly another mix-up would occur. Randy Hedger was involved with car number 33. Back down pit road, Kenny Schrader was in the pits. Brian Ross would loop it with car number 69, and Mike McLaughlin would have a flat right rear tire. It was now Stefanik who would make contact with Ruggiero to cut a tire on car number 16. Down the back straightaway, Brian Ross had taken over the lead when suddenly Ruggiero would falter. Mikey Widitzko was involved and hand grenade hard into the wall with car 36. It was then Tom Baldwin to hold on and dominate the racing action to the checker to take down a win. Mike McLaughlin was the champion of the Tour with 36.11. Reggie Ruggiero was second with 34.56. Third was Brian Ross with 34.41, and fourth was Rick Fuller with 32.01. Fifth was Jeff Fuller with 31.73. Sixth was Jamie DeMato with 31.42. Seventh was Tom Baldwin with 31.37. Eighth was Tom Bowles with 30.64. Ninth was Carl Pastriak with 27.03. And 10th was George Kemp with 25.56. Jeff Fuller had his share of problems during 1988, but still managed to finish 5th in the Tour point standing. His brother Rick Fuller had his best season ever on the Tour with 2 victories. Consistency would again be the story for Brian Ross to finish among the top 3. Reggie Ruggiero would finish in the number 2 spot, as Mike McLaughlin was the Tour champion.
Congratulations to the champion Mike McLaughlin and all the front-running teams of the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. You know, just before the holidays, there was a major news conference announced in New England Motorsports. The setting was Concord, New Hampshire, where the Bear family announced the fact that they were now the new owners of Bryan Motorsports Park. Their plans are to build a super speedway of the North. The 1-mile race facility will draw some 50,000 plus fans as Winston Cup and Indy cars and more will compete right here in the heart of New England.
Today in Concord, New Hampshire, a major new racing facility was announced by the new partners of New Hampshire Speedway Corporation. It will consist of a major new facility on the current grounds of Bryan Motorsport Park in the town of Loudon. The new facility in Loudon is going to consist of a super speedway and what other major parts?
Well, that's right, Tom. We're going to build a 1-mile super speedway which will be incorporated into the existing road course. Building an additional number of grandstands, bringing the capacity to 55,000. We're going to expand the parking as well to accommodate more cars and accommodate them more efficiently. In terms of the racetrack, we're going to be building, as we said, a mile speedway, approximately 65 feet in width, asphalt, with about 10,000 feet of retaining walls, a 4-foot high wall, 14,000 feet of fencing.
Now, do you see this as being a facility for open-wheel cars as well as stock cars?
We would like to think so, yes.
And what do you think a major facility of this nature will mean to race fans in the Northeast?
Well, I think it's going to give race fans in the Northeast an opportunity to see racing that otherwise they'd be required to travel certainly out of state to see, and well beyond a reasonable distance. It's going to give not only the race fans more of an opportunity to see different types and more professional types of racing. I think it's going to give competitors in the region an opportunity to gain exposure that they haven't been afforded otherwise.
And do you think this facility will have a national impact on the racing scene?
I believe it will. I think it's going to expand interest in motorsports into the Northeast. It's going to broaden the audience that's interested in motorsports. It's going to increase the exposure for sponsors, for drivers. Spectators, again, are going to have an opportunity to see events that they haven't been able to. I think it's going to benefit the sport on a national level, yes.
When can we expect to see the first event take place on the new super speedway here in New Hampshire?
Well, we'd like to think that if things go as we anticipate, the facility will be operational in August of this year.
The three principals in the New Hampshire Speedway Corporation, in addition to Gary Baer, include his father, Bob Baer, long known as the promoter of Oxford Plains Speedway, and Peter Prescott of Gardner, Maine. In Concord, New Hampshire, this is Tom Elliman reporting.
Having a super speedway in the north is of major importance to all of us in New England motorsports. It gives us the opportunity to showcase what goes on here in the heart of New England. And for you, the race fans of New England, it's a rare opportunity too, for you to get to witness the excitement of Winston Cup competition, Indy-style racing, and a whole lot more. And as for the credibility of the Baer family, the success story of Oxford Plains Speedway, well, tells it all. And there's no question about it that if they're involved, the facility that they're about to present will be among the finest racetracks in the country. You know, that's going to kind of wrap things up for this edition of Race Week. We hope you've enjoyed a recap of 1988 and the NASCAR Winston Modified Tour. And to all of the competitors in the Modified Tour, we wish you the best in 1989. You know, speaking of 1989, on the next edition of Race Week, we'll be venturing to Mike McLaughlin's garage and take a look at Sherry Cup as they prepare for the up-and-coming season. We'll also be at the 1988 NASCAR Winston Racing Series NASCAR Modified Tour Awards Banquet in West Springfield, Massachusetts. All of that and more will be coming at you for the next edition of Race Week. Until then, we say take care, and we'll see you again next time for more of the best in New England motorsports coverage. Bye-bye now.